Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Three things that we're going to talk about today, and then of course we're going to take your questions. First thing we'll talk about is COVID, and there's some new information on that. Second thing we're going to talk briefly about is the heat, and we're just going to remind you of some things. And the third thing we're going to talk about is the violence that we're experiencing in our city. And for that conversation, Judge Jimmy Edwards, the Director of Public Safety, is going to be here today to talk about violence. And we know the negative impact it has. So I'm going to begin by talking about COVID. And just to say that, you know, there's some sort of good news, bad news here. On the good news front, the city yesterday reported 36 new cases, 34 the day before. That's towards the high side. But just 10 days ago, 9 days ago, we were at 53 and 47. So that's not extreme. One of the things which I mentioned to you last Monday was that we still do have a backlog of some tests, and this is as a result of the private laboratories. I'm sure that you've all heard this on the national news that Quest and LabCorp, which are the two biggest they are now have a backup because we have enough tests and people are getting tested, but now there's a bottleneck in the system with regard to processing those tests. So I know that we're expecting that will get better here in the next couple of weeks. But right now we are still waiting on a number of test results. The other thing that I want to mention today about COVID is that today, for the first time in about 3 weeks, actually almost a month, we have over 300 people in the hospital in the region as a result of both confirmed and suspected cases of COVID. 315 people in the hospital in our region, and so that's up a bit. The last time we hit over 300 cases was on June the 6th, so one month ago. So that reflects, today's Wednesday, there's a 2-day lag in reporting hospital data. And so this reflects the first information really since the holiday. These are Monday numbers since they're 2 days behind. Now, on the positive side of this, we have 56 people in the ICU. That's up a little bit, but not tremendously, and we are flat in terms of the number of people who are on ventilators, still at 27. But as you know, we've talked about a lot. Seems like every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we've talked about how with the reopening of the economy, with the reopening of stores and restaurants and offices and all businesses, we are continuing to see community spread. We are continuing to have more and more cases. The number of cases that we're getting now is the age is trending younger. I think that's probably to be expected when you consider that young people are out and about. When I'm talking up 20s, 30s, most of the folks that are in an older age category, it appears, are still having a lot of caution, taking a lot of caution, keeping their groups small, and also wearing masks, keeping your social distance. So we are concerned about the number of people, about the number of cases. And it's not any place nearly as bad as many other areas of the country, but we just don't want to see any uptick, even though we anticipated that would happen, of course. So that's just a message to say, please wear your masks. You've got to wear them. You've got to wear them if you're in a public building. And it is very, very strongly advised for you to wear them if you're outside as well. So I wanted to talk about, on this COVID subject, a conversation that I had in the last few days. I've talked to both Congressman Clay and Senator Blunt about what's going on in Congress with regard to COVID funding, with regard to reimbursements, but also with regard to testing, and learned some pretty interesting information that, and we all believe, I think, that we've got to have more and more and more testing. Because if you have a diagnostic test, it tells you whether you're positive today or the day that you had the test. And so we need a test that is not dependent on a lab to be able to process that test. So there are many scientists and researchers who are attempting to develop a test that is an at-home test. Maybe it would be a saliva test, maybe it would be a urine test, but something that you can test yourself regularly and is quick, results are quick, and the results are reliable. And so Senator Blunt, who chairs these committees and has this committee and has hearings, he indicated today that he is hopeful that maybe by Labor Day, that's 2 months from now, maybe by Labor Day, we might have such a test. There's no guarantee. I'm just trying to sort of keep you updated on what's going on. And then, of course, very hopeful that we might have a vaccine for this around the first of the year. Again, no guarantees. That's 6 months off. So we've got to coexist with COVID for the next 6 months or until a vaccine is developed. But Congress is, and the Senate and the House are really pushing the researchers very hard on developing several different vaccines that will be going through the FDA concurrently with production, and knowing that they, some of them may not work out, may not make it all the way to market, but to do this on a multi-level parallel path so that we can get as quickly as possible to a vaccine, and first of all, of course, also to a quick diagnostic test that can be done at home that doesn't have to rely on FedExing or shipping samples to a lab somewhere and then that lab being backed up. So I don't know, it's a little bit of encouraging news, I think, that the senator at least believes that these things are coming along pretty well. So in the meantime, because we all want our economy to keep going, because none of us want to pull back on the restrictions on business, we have to wear a mask. We've got to take these precautions so that we don't get sick. We know that there are cases of COVID in virtually every group, and you see it professional sports teams, you see it in restaurants, you see it in businesses. It is around. So to protect yourself, wear a mask. So that's it for COVID today. I'm hopeful that we don't continue to see this slight uptick, but we may, and that makes it even all the more important for you to wear a mask. Now, heat, although I don't believe it's rained downtown here, but it looks like it's about to rain. And what's the temperature? I think it's 88 or 90. You all can look at your phones and you'll know that too.
It's
but
90.
It's 90, okay? Well, that's down from where it was and where it was predicted to be, but we know that we are in the middle of a real heat wave. So please check on your neighbors, check on older people especially, check on someone who might not be turning their air conditioning on if they have air conditioning because they don't want to incur that utility bill. We all know it's expensive to run an air conditioner, and it's very expensive to run window air conditioners. So I want to just remind everybody that Cool Down STL, it's heat up in the winter, cool down in the summer, is for the entire region. And I think this regional leadership on heat up and cool down has been really important over the last, I think, 20 years. But so far this year, Cool Down has installed over 750 air conditioner units across the region. Our fire department installs air conditioners for folks You need to be a senior. If you don't have an air conditioner and you need one, you need to be a senior or disabled, and then we can get you an air conditioner and have it installed in your house. By the end of July, so what's that, another 3.5, 4 weeks, we will probably have installed another 250 air conditioners, so a total of about 1,000. But the need's still great, so of course, for those of you who can, and those of you who are willing, go online, make a little donation to Cool Down STL for the air conditioner units, and of course also for utility assistance. I'm going to tell you where to find this online. It's pretty simple. It's just cooldownsTL.org. CooldownsTL.org. You can donate online. You can also you can mail in a check, but just go to cooldownsTL.org if you're willing to help out a little bit. And you can also go to that same website if you know someone who needs an air conditioner who's over 60. Some people think that 60 is a senior. I'm not so sure about that. But if you're 60 or over or disabled, you can request an air conditioner online. So very important to check on your neighbors during these heat waves, especially when we've had a number of hot days. St. Louis has a lot of brick homes, and they tend to heat up over time. It's not the first hot day, it's the second, third, fourth, fifth hot day, and we've had a number of those lately. So please check on people. If you need help, go to cooldownsTL.org. And with that, I want to turn this over to Judge Jimmy Edwards. Judge Edwards is the Director of Public Safety for our city. He is over about half, a little more than half actually, of our city employees. So police, fire, building division, corrections, and probably excise, I'm probably missing a few there. So it's a very big and important role here in the city of St. Louis and does a great job for us. So I talked about the violence that we experienced in our city over the 4th of July weekend. I talked about that on Monday. We've continued to have a couple more days with really too much gun violence. And so I thought, rather than hearing from me about this, I'm going to turn this over to Judge Jimmy Edwards. He'll talk with you a little bit about it. We're both happy to take questions on any subject after that. So thank you, and we'll be back at you. Judge Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. The Public Safety Department certainly appreciates all of the support that it gets from the citizens of the city of St. Louis. We know that the police department needs your support. I know that you need ours, and we are ready, able, and willing to support you. So if you see something, please say something. It is important that we all participate in public safety. It is all of our responsibility. The motives for the majority of violent crime in the city of St. Louis are personal disputes, domestic altercations, or drug conflicts. Many of the crime scenes that occur in the city of St. Louis, they occur inside. So these are inside scenes versus outside crime scenes. The majority of the victims in the city of St. Louis are targeted, and they are not random. We had a very difficult June with respect to violent crime. In June of this year, we had 32 homicides. Last year, there were 22 homicides for the exact same period in June. As of today, we have arrested 18 people that have been accused of committing those 32 homicides. Nationally, violent crime is up. Today, the city of St. Louis would rank 8th in terms of violent crime, based upon 100,000 percentage of folk. We would be behind cities like New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Philadelphia, Dallas, Memphis, Milwaukee, and Pittsburgh. We know, however, that it is our responsibility to try to get those crimes reduced. Violence, unfortunately, is very devastating to all of the communities. This violence is occurring in every portion and sector in our city. We're working very, very hard to try to address it. Just for some good news, however, when we look at the reductions of crime from this time last year, I can tell you that robberies citywide are down 17%. Also down are carjackings, 19%. Sexual assaults are down 9%. And burglaries across the city of St. Louis are down 5%. Unfortunately, vehicle thefts are up 1%, as well as larcenies are up 3%. So overall, the crime for the city of St. Louis for the first half of the year is up 1.4%. We're working on many fronts, including protests. We respect the rights of everyone to protest non-violently in the city of St. Louis. We are committed to making sure that we protect human life as best as we can. We are committed to protecting against injuries to our citizens as a result of protests or in any other confrontation. We are committed to protecting property during the protests. And I can say that most of the protests that we have encountered, they have been peaceful and they have been nonviolent. We have responded very directly and very swiftly with respect to people that have broken the law during protests. Again, most of those people would not be in protest, no matter what. These are folk that were not interested in protesting. These are people that were only interested in breaking the law. We haven't seen too many of those folk since June 1st. So I'm here and available to answer all of your questions. We certainly want to be as open and as transparent as we possibly can. Many of the cases that we are dealing with are ongoing, and therefore there will be some things that we will not be able to share, but I certainly invite all of your questions.
Okay, Jacob, do we have questions?
A few questions. Judge, can you address, this was submitted, can you address what some of the challenges are in keeping police from solving some of the cases?
The challenge for not solving many of the cases is just cooperation. Unfortunately, we see it not only in cases where friends are involved and there are many, many witnesses, we just don't get to cooperation. And I understand why sometimes that we don't get that cooperation. We don't get it in families where members of families in domestic cases have had conflict. And so it is important, it is imperative that if you see something, you have to say something. In order to solve crime, we need witnesses. And that's the reason when police officers go to the prosecutor's office, they have to go to the prosecutor's office with sufficient probable cause. And that probable cause, more often than not, is based upon the witness account of what happened. And we have to utilize the witnesses in order to make the arrest. If witnesses don't cooperate, even if we have a big hunch, if we have a significant hunch that a person committed a crime, without a witness to corroborate that, we are unable to make a sufficient application, sufficient enough that a prosecutor would issue a case.
We did get a question, Judge, about Washington Avenue and some of the activity that's happened downtown well after 11 o'clock at night, with guns being shot off, fireworks at the corner of Washington and 11th, cruising, drag racing. Can you speak to some of the efforts the police have taken to try and get that under control?
Yeah, thank you very much. We have implemented a new detail downtown on the riverfront to try to address cruising. With respect to Wash Ave, we have police officers, we have cruising details that are out during the weekend and sometimes during the week. All depends upon what the events are. But we're cognizant of the problem downtown. We're adding on officers as needed, but we have a permanent detail that's addressing cruising on the riverfront, around Lumiere Place, and around the other businesses downtown.
Need more officers.
And we absolutely need more officers. At any given time, we are down in excess of 100 officers. So we absolutely need more officers. So if you're out there and you want to be a police officers, please call us and let us know. We would like to have you. It's an excellent police department, very dedicated men and women, so please join us. We need police officers.
Judge, I think the last question we have for you is Kyle wrote in and asked, do you know year over year how many citations happen to be issued, or what were the consequences of people shooting fireworks off around the 4th of July and how busy that kept first responders this year?
Yeah, I tell you, it's a problem. Fireworks has always been a problem, not only in our city, but in every municipality in our region. We had over 900 911 calls with respect to fireworks. Our fire department responded to over 500 fires, including dumpster fires, which kept them busy. And often we have to send police with our fire trucks. And so that takes a lot of our police officers out of the district to address fire issues. So there were many arrests made for possessing and shooting off fireworks. But I'm happy to report that the number of fireworks and the number of those types of violations, they tend to go down very, very quickly. And so I hope that tonight or this evening we will have little to none with respect to calls about fireworks.
Thanks, Judge.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judge. Appreciate it. Thank you all as well. I hope you were able to get some of your questions answered, and we'll do this again as well. So, any questions for me, Jacob?
Quite a few questions. So we have a question from Sarah Mayer asking about heat and COVID-19 and what, if any, sort of precautions might be taken in any of the inside cooling centers or places where people have to go to try and beat the heat.
Well, really, it's social distancing. You just have to stay apart and you have to wear a mask. Those are the precautions. So, you know, the heat and COVID, two health issues, of course. We have to stay far apart from one another. Cooling locations, libraries, rec centers, different places where folks can go to cool down or to cool off, I should say, if they don't have air conditioning at their house. But if that is the case, please try to get in touch with cooldownstl.org to help with that.
We have quite a few questions about masks, Mayor. So what would you say that a business needs to do who might be struggling to get customer or patrons to comply? And is there anything the city can do to enforce this with consequences for not following the rule?
So, yes, there are things we can do. We're, as I think I've said a number of times, trying to use persuasion. If there is a business that you think is not enforcing that, all of their employees should have on masks, and they should actually have them on all the way over their, as I demonstrate here, you know, all the way over your nose and your mouth. But if you think there's an issue, call 622-4800. Our health department will call them, we'll talk with them, and then if it continues to be a problem, we'll pay them a visit. And we're not interested in shutting businesses down. We do have that authority, but we're interested in getting compliance. So that's for both employees and for customers. One of the things I failed to mention earlier is that we did supply yesterday the St. Louis Public Library. All of the library locations will have masks. If you need a mask, we supplied them with a mask that looks basically like this. This is a surgical mask that you can wear over your ears, and this is on your nose, so you can get one. The St. Louis Public Library, if you don't have a mask.
We have a follow-up question to that. Do you think that masks are still an effective way to fight COVID-19, even if they're difficult to enforce with sometimes not a lot of consequences?
Of course, yes. Because if there are 10 people and 9 of them have on a mask and 1 of them doesn't, well, that one is a problem, but at least most people have on a mask. I think I mentioned this the other day. I was at Ted Drew's over the weekend, and in line, people were outside in line and had a long line. And the vast majority of the people in line outside, even though they were 6 feet apart, because there are little marks down on the pavement where you have to wait to get your ice cream, or your frozen custard, I should say, most people had on masks. I know that there are reports, because some of you email me or post on Facebook about places that have not been doing well with masks, but we are calling those folks, calling those businesses, and we're also trying to make masks available. We have provided masks to all of the housing authority folks. We've provided masks, as I said just now, to the library. So if we've provided a lot of masks to churches. So it doesn't have to be a surgical mask like this. You can use, in fact, I think we're really supposed to be calling them face coverings, not masks, but you know, you can use a cloth face covering, a bandana, something that you make, and they're available almost everywhere. So.
Couple of general questions, Mayor. Tracy wants to know when she'll be able to drive through Carondelet Park again.
Well, there's one road I know in Carondelet Park that is open. It's the main road that goes through the park. And you know, I've addressed this one before, and it's such a balancing act, because Tracy, as sure as you're saying to me, hey, I want all the roads to be open, there's somebody over here saying, I don't want any of the roads to be open. So we're trying to have a balancing act here, to have enough room for cars to get where they need to go, but also give away part of the right-of-way, the roads, to folks that are walking, riding their bike, so that they can do that in a socially distanced way.
We have a question from Allison asking about playgrounds and wondering if they are still technically closed.
Playgrounds are, I don't think we've made an announcement that they're open, fundamentally because Dr. Eccles thinks that that's just a risk that he'd like to avoid, but we also understand people are using playgrounds and they're playing on playgrounds. And so I would just say to parents out there and caregivers, you know, please make sure that you're wiping down the equipment, because there's no way for us to wipe down every piece of equipment, every swing, every slide between kids. And so make sure you're wiping it down, and make sure you've got hand sanitizer to, you know, have those little guys sanitize up, because it's, you know, there's a lot of kids playing on a lot of equipment there. So.
Kevin's question, Mayor, is do you think that the schools in the city are going to be prepared to open either in August or September?
I do think the schools in the city are going to be prepared to open. Now, I say that with some reticence, because we've got to see what continues to happen with these numbers. But here we are on July the 8th, and my answer would be yes. Our health department has, and also Dr. Will Pinkney, who has been on with the Live with Lidas with me before, and he's the Director of Children, Youth, and Families, have both worked very hard with all of the schools in the city, whether it be SLPS, parochial schools, charter schools, independent schools, with a hefty set of guidelines for what schools have to do to open. But I think we all think kids need to go to school, and you know, distance learning is good for some, but not so good for everybody. So we're very hopeful that middle to the end of August, schools will be able to open. Although they'll be wearing masks, there'll be smaller group sizes, they'll be trying to socially distance kids. You know how hard that's going to be. But yes, we believe school will open.
Jessica's question, Mayor, is if you happen to know if all of the gun crimes that have been committed in the city of St. Louis are a result of what you have called in the past lax gun laws in the state.
So are all of the gun crimes a result of that? Oh, I'm sure not. Gun crimes are result, as Judge Edwards just said, they're a result often of drugs, not always, but often of drugs. They're a result of personal disputes, family disputes. Those are the primary reasons for gun crimes, settling your differences with guns versus words. However, easy access to guns makes it easier for someone to just get a gun and reach for it and use it, and then, you know, there's no looking back from that. So, you know, it's all a combination, and lax gun laws are a part of the puzzle, but they're not a result of all gun crimes, of course.
Linda's question is, should all city residents get tested now or wait to find out if they're positive or not?
You know, I think is that Linda?
Linda.
I think that is a great question, Linda. If you feel uneasy, or if you have any little symptom at all, I would say you should get tested. And the results of that test are going to tell you whether or not you were COVID positive on the day you had that test. So just, let's say it comes back negative. Let's hope it does. Well, that doesn't mean you don't have it next week. And that's why what I talked about earlier, we need a very quick, accurate test that can be done at home, where people can test themselves multiple times. So I don't know, is that once a week or once every couple weeks? Just so that then we can identify who is positive, and that you would know that you were positive, and that you would isolate yourself, and that we would contact trace all the people that you'd been in close contact with. So I do think that's a good question. Should everybody get tested today? No. But if you want to get tested today, you can. And we're waiting, we hope by Labor Day, as Senator Blunt said this morning, that there would be perhaps an easy, quick result test that you could do at home.
Amanda's question, Mayor, is now that the CARES Act, which just passed the Board of Aldermen, by the way.
While we were on this.
While we were on Live with Lida.
Okay.
So that's
great.
good.
Yay, Board of Aldermen. Thank you for passing the CARES Act. Appreciate that.
Her question, though, is what are the next steps for the money you've allocated to help people with renters and mortgage assistance?
So next step, we'll be rolling out a program where people can apply. We have several groups who will help us administer those programs. So you'll see, since they've passed it, you'll see more on that from us.
Mark's question, Mayor, is how does the city of St. Louis calculate the number of officers that it determines it's short by?
So the budget has 1,342, I think is the number, officers in the budget. And today we have around 1,200. So that's 140 something officers short. And so it's essentially the number of officers that are budgeted and the number of officers that we think that we need. Some people would say, well, other cities have fewer officers per capita. That's true. But what we know here is that we have a lot of violence in our city, and that has been sustained. It didn't start this year, didn't start 3 years ago, it's been going on for a considerable amount of time. And recruiting for police officers has been a very big challenge. And so you may have heard, if you joined us earlier, you heard Judge Edwards say, you know, if you are interested in being a police officer, we've got an excellent police department, and we'd love to visit with you about that. But that's how we determine the number of officers that we're short.
Kim's question is, or Kimberly, I should say, how is the city stepping up when she says state and federal officials sometimes feel dismissive that COVID-19 is an actual threat?
So, Kimberly, that's been a challenge since day one. However, let me just say this. We have to do what we think is best for the people here. And we know that early on, if you look at any of the graphs, we know that early on the St. Louis region had many, many COVID cases. And that's why we took the steps that we did to basically put in a stay-at-home order in place for 8 weeks. That was terrible. It was tough on everyone. in order to tamp down the spread. That worked. We began reopening about 6 weeks ago, maybe 7 weeks ago by now. And we are beginning to see a slight increase. And so we're concerned about that. But, you know, we make the best decisions we can regionally. Dr. Sam Page and I are in pretty much lockstep on the steps that we've taken with regard to stay-at-home orders, with guidance for reopening businesses, mandatory mask orders. That's important because, you know, the city-county line, this disease doesn't know anything different from the city-county line. So it's important that we're all in sync on that. And we do really what we think is best, and we ask you to help. And St. Louisans stepped up big time during the stay-at-home order. That's the reason that we were able to begin to reopen businesses in our economy. And you know, it's not just about the business, it's about the employees. It's about the workers at the business who need that paycheck, but also need to be safe, to be healthy. So we do what we have to do.
All right, we have time for a few more questions. So Tish is watching. I think she's a regular viewer.
Hi, Tish.
Her question is if you happen to know if homicides in the city were lower when we had a curfew a couple of weeks ago, and if it would be feasible to put the city under a curfew if we continue to see more homicides.
So the curfew went into effect on, I think it was June 2nd, or maybe June 2nd. And it was in effect for a week, just a little over a week, I believe. And what you heard Judge Edwards just talk about is that despite that curfew, we had 32 homicides in the month of June. Now we've had a total right now of 116,
16, I think.
okay, I was going to say 14, but around 115 homicides to date, and 32 of them were in June. So it doesn't appear that the curfew made a significant impact on that. Bear in mind, the curfew came after an 8-week stay-at-home order. So there's a lot of pent-up energy sometimes in that.
All right, Donna's question, maybe final question. Would the city reconsider the mask mandate for when people are inside gyms? At her gym, they are 6 feet apart. They don't share equipment. They wash their hands. Wants to know if the city could reconsider that.
Well, you know, I've had that conversation with Dr. Eccles, and what he would tell you, and I think you probably know this, is that especially when you're at a gym and you're breathing hard and you have all this aerosol going out, especially there, you know, masks are important. I do know that they're difficult. They're a pain in the neck. But having some face covering to try to keep your breath and the particles that are in your breath down is really pretty important. So we are sorry that we, you know, that this is necessary, but gyms are a place where, you know, it's a high-risk place. Okay, that's it. Thank you all. Appreciate you being with us today, and we'll be back and talk to you on Friday. Thanks all. Have a good week.